Liz Galveston, 1900, many long years ago. The storm clouds gathered o'er the ocean, and the wind began to blow. Wasn't that a mighty storm? Wasn't that a mighty storm in the morning? Wasn't that a mighty storm that blew all the people all away? From a very young age, as part of my culture, I began learning about disasters and catastrophes, most of them accurate, some legendary, but it was a part of my upbringing, and that's how, both in the written and oral tradition, accounts of these historic catastrophes has evolved. My name is Kevin Norton, and my topic is culture and emergency management. We define culture as generally as a shared set of customs, values, beliefs, and worldviews. Where does culture come from? It's an evolutionary process that's influenced by many factors. Major factors are geographic location and environmental conditions. They shape and form the way that people have to behave in order to survive, and these in turn, over millennia, turn into customs and traditions and affect their values and belief systems. And like I said, the accounts of catastrophic events throughout history, both written and oral, they're passed down through generations, and they themselves become a vital component of the culture. When two or more cultures encounter each other, there's a lot of really great beneficial things that can happen. The exchange of ideas, sharing of technologies. Unfortunately, it's all too often the case when cultures collide or clash because of differences in their belief systems and other aspects of their culture. They clash in very negative ways. There's a great potential for maladaptive behaviors and serious misunderstandings in these cross-cultural interactions, especially during times of disaster. I think this is especially true in the United States, which counts literally hundreds of different racial, ethnic, and other subgroups among its inhabitants. In social work, we use the term cultural competence to describe activities which maximize cross-cultural interaction. And hopefully this minimizes obstacles and barriers, which can many times hinder the helping process. Cultural competence is a model that emphasizes several key principles. Uh, these include uh, an unconditional respect for cultural diversity. People must uh, be tolerant and accepting and open-minded of other uh, cultures and their customs. It's sort of like the golden rule. We would expect them to accept ours, and so we should treat them like we would want to be treated. Uh, the other thing from respect for the culture is an attainment of specific knowledge about the cultures that you're going to be working with. This is would be especially true with regard to uh, many types of nonverbal communication. Obviously, um, if you get helpers that speak the same language as the people that need helping, that's a great asset. But there's all kinds of nonverbal language. There are specific instances where Native American Indians, for instance, may become distrustful uh, with direct eye contact. And knowledge of these things can aid the helping process in many ways. This is really important for relief workers also to have a continual uh, self-assessment process going on within themselves. We all have certain biases, prejudices, and stereotypical mindsets that are more or less beyond our control. That these uh, things exist in our minds uh, from our past experiences and from our upbringing. However, the more we are aware of them, then the more we are able to keep them locked up in the special box that doesn't allow them to interfere with our interactions in cross cultural settings. Um, it is not necessary to rid yourself completely, even if you could. It is not necessary to rid yourself completely of all personal biases and prejudices in order to be culturally competent. Uh, it's very important to understand that cultural competence is not something that you just all of a sudden have one day. Cultural competence is an unending process of continual learning. It requires commitment and uh, experience and an open mind. It involves empathy and compassion and all of the other core values of social work. So why is cultural competence so crucial to effective emergency management operations? Um, someone who is a relief worker who is culturally competent is better able to determine the most effective course of action for each individual client as well as for subgroups of populations which could be considered to share enough similar values, beliefs, and customs to be called a culture. Perhaps most importantly, it's generally the case that ethnic and racial and other cultural minority populations are often living a very marginalized and disenfranchised existence before a disaster strikes. They're already living on the fringe of society, on the very edge of existence in many cases. And so special attention needs to be paid by relief workers that these populations, which are the most vulnerable, were in fact the most vulnerable before the disaster struck. They are especially vulnerable. Not to say that they do not experience or do not have the capacity for great resistance and resiliency, but people, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that someone who is in great need during relatively calm times would be especially in need following a catastrophic event. So cultural competence, above all, is a process that never stops. Kind of like the folk music process. There's been folk songs written about all the great disasters, from the Great Flood, coal mine disasters, the sinking of the Titanic. There's recently, over the last 7 years, been a number of songs written about Hurricane Katrina. And the process will continue. This one started with about the great 1900 Galveston hurricane. Has always been one of my favorites. So I will leave you with that. Well, Galveston, 1900, many long years ago, storm clouds gathered on the ocean, and the wind began to blow. Wasn't that a mighty storm? Wasn't that a mighty storm in the morning? Wasn't that a mighty storm? It blew all the people all away. That blew all the people all away.